So, this happened about 17 years ago during summer break. My friend and I went to visit another friend who was staying in this tiny remote village in Belarus for the summer. The house was his grandparents', and the whole place felt super isolated. Honestly, though, it was actually a lot of fun at first. We went swimming at a nearby lake every day, and at night, we would stay up late just sitting by the water, listening to that kind of deafening silence that you only get in the countryside, talking for hours. During the day, we would go mushroom picking, explore the area, take pictures, and just make some really good memories together. We stayed for a few weeks, but then one of my friends had to leave early because of some family stuff. The only way out was a bus that came twice a week, and she missed it. So she came back to our friend's place and asked if we could walk her to a nearby highway to try to hitch a ride. The main road was about 7 miles away, so we started walking. When we got there, it was midweek and no cars passed at all. I guess most people were still at work in the city, but as it got later, we decided to just walk back. On the way back, we passed through a few neighboring villages that were half abandoned. Honestly, it was pretty creepy, but we kept ourselves entertained by singing and joking around to keep the fear at bay. It was getting dark and we still had about 4 miles left. And then, we ended up on this road with dense forest on both sides. Suddenly, we started hearing noises coming from the trees. It was pitch dark and, honestly, pretty unsettling. They keep saying that. They keep being like, honestly, pretty weird, or honestly, pretty cool. Let's see how many times. I never, proofread these before I start narrating them. So, your first time hearing them is my first time reading them, which is why I always bitch so much. Okay, we tried to joke about it, but deep down, we all felt that something was off. Then, my friend pointed, and we saw 2 huge yellow eyes staring at us from the trees. We just kept walking in silence for a bit. What? Until one of us nervously said, "Must be some wild fireflies messing with us." We laughed, but we all knew those definitely were not fireflies. Keep in mind, this was before cell phones, so there was no way to call anyone. We just had to keep moving and get back safely. As we got closer to the village, 2 of us heard a female voice coming from the forest. We looked at each other, both realizing we heard it, while the third friend was talking and didn't notice. I got goosebumps. It sounded so real, and the fact that I wasn't the only one who heard it made it even creepier. We didn't say anything until we got back to the house. And here's where it gets even weirder. In Slavic folklore, there's not just the Leshy, or the forest spirit who protects the woods and sometimes tricks people, but there's also the Rusalka. Rusalki are these mythological female spirits, often connected to lakes and rivers. They're usually described as beautiful women with long hair, sometimes said to lure people, especially at night, with their singing or voices. We'd been hanging out at the lake for so many nights, and then to hear a mysterious female voice coming from the trees later on, it definitely made us wonder if we'd gone a little too close to something supernatural. We still joke about those unhinged fireflies, but deep down, we all know we saw and heard something we can't explain. Between the abandoned houses, the glowing eyes in the forest, and that eerie female voice, it was honestly one of the scariest and strangest experiences of my life. And yeah, I still think about those nights at the lake. I wonder what might have been watching us, or listening to us, from the dark. I'm currently writing this at 2:13 a.m. on a Sunday. I'm choosing to write this rather than contacting emergency services, or my family, as I don't believe I'm in any acute danger, and I don't want to worry anyone. But I'm still terrified, and I would be happy to hear if anyone has a probable reason for the events that have been happening. For context, I'm currently staying in a fairly rural area, and I have a few neighboring houses near me. I'm staying at my parents' summer cottage of sorts, trying to study for my flight school finals, but I want to state with absolute confidence that I'm not aware of any neighbors staying here at this time, as it's still wintertime and most people do not have the proper equipment to keep their cottages warm. Everything started happening last Thursday, so only a couple of days ago, I guess. I don't recall the timings of these incidences as accurately as I would like to, as I've tried to limit my phone usage to completely focus on my studies. But according to the sun being quite low, I would assume it was around 5, maybe 6 p.m., which is when the sun starts to set. I was out and about grabbing some dry wood from the storage to keep the fire burning for the night, and I heard a car driving on the dirt road down from the property. I was pleasantly surprised, as I hadn't had any company during my stay, so I started heading down to the road to see if it was anyone I knew. Before I could make my way down, though, I heard a car rev to its maximum, like he was in first gear, and then kick the gas pedal as hard as he could, and you could hear the gravel flying on the road. It's super hard to explain. I hope I don't sound like a lunatic, but I don't know why, but this being the only human contact I had during the past week made me feel so uneasy. I was immediately contemplating leaving and heading back home, as I had read enough about break-ins and such and thought he might have been scoping the place out. But I calmed myself down and shrugged it off. After all, I knew I couldn't get any studying done back home. Fast forward to Friday, and I had just settled down into my bed, which is located on a sort of loft in the main house. I was watching an episode of Family Guy in front of a decently sized window that overlooks the front side of the property, and I can also sort of see to the parking area down the hill. I say sort of because there's a ton of trees and a storage building placed in front. Now, I don't know what kind of error could have caused this, but there's a motion sensor placed on a tree near the front, so you can potentially park a car there in the dark. I don't own a car. I came with my motorcycle, which I had locked into the storage, so it couldn't have been picking up my car or vehicle. Now, the horrifying thing was that the motion sensor went on in the parking area. It stayed on for about 30 seconds before it went off, and then, almost immediately, back on. It did this for, I'm not even kidding, 15 minutes or so straight, until it went dark. Now, if this was a horror movie, I would have gone and checked that, but I was sitting on the edge of my bed with poop in my pants, and I started Googling what could have caused it. I came to the realization that it was probably an animal. Maybe there's a bird nest located there, or something walked in front of it. Nothing out of the ordinary happened on Saturday, but the last straw happened just around a couple of hours ago, which, this, I can't put my finger on. It could be that the isolation is making me crazy, or the fact that it was an animal, but something about it still gives me shivers. I was gonna go take a piss. We don't have a built-in bathroom, so I just do it near the woods. I was in the middle of my business when I heard footsteps. Like, literal footsteps. They could have also been animals, yeah, but what kind? I have no idea. Now I'm gonna try and explain this the best I can before I go to try and call my parents again. Hell, I don't know if I can even post this. The service has been so bad today. I've had times where I've been without service for hours. I'm just terrified and will be leaving when the sun rises, but I won't step out of the house until sunrise. That's for goddamn sure. Now, try to understand this, please. I know I sound crazy, but the footsteps occurred in intervals, having about a few seconds pause in between, but it wasn't walking speed. It wasn't running speed. It was abnormally fast, like someone was stomping their feet on the ground as fast as they could, and then stomping until doing it again. I ran inside, locked every single one of the doors, closed the blinds, and I'm currently typing this with a kitchen knife in hand. I created a Reddit account and Googled the best channel to gain some sort of comfort from a wiser person who can convince me that there isn't some psycho outside playing a sick joke on me. I repeat, I don't have any neighbors staying near me, nor have any cars driven past our road today. I'm still hearing sounds outside, but it could be my mind playing tricks on me. My best guess is it's an animal, which is why I won't call the cops. I'm gonna look like a maniac anyway if I do so, and the worst thing is if they bring it up on the psychological evaluations for my future flight school interviews. I know I sound like a lunatic, but please, if you intend to troll me, refrain from commenting. I'm already terrified enough as it is. Nah, fuck that, full send. Don't refrain from commenting. Dude's probably like wigged out on like caffeine with no hours of sleep, just studying, and he's like, a raccoon. Oh my god, a burglar. The raccoon's gonna steal my Family Guy. January 12th, 2024. This date will forever live in infamy. That Friday night irreversibly turned my happy, healthy, successful life upside down. This is a tale of party drugs. It's also a life and death journey I could have never imagined in my wildest dreams. Call it a harrowing dive into the extremes of the human condition, or a case study at the intersection of medicine, pharma, policy, and brain science. As the one who lived it, writing this several months later is my confession, assembling the shards of a shattered world into one broken mosaic. Here we go. At my brother's 50th birthday in Cabo, cocaine fueled the festivities. By no means am I a user, but I'm also not a novice. I'm a typical millennial who never looked for drugs, but is not afraid to try something passed by friends. For context, I've lived a drama-free life, successful by any metric. I have a bunch of advanced degrees and manage a small but thriving international company. I'm also an understated middle child by nature, so making noise or having weird stuff happen is not my deal. Until that night, I'd coasted without anything major ever going wrong. Being in my early 40s, my partying days are in the past, and January was the first time in probably a decade, since business school, that I'd be touching party drugs. Over several hours at a place called Bagatelle, where the opening dinner of the 3-day bash took place, I had about a dozen plus lines and bumps of coke while sipping rum. It was a festive, if over-the-top scene as our group of 40 danced atop the long birthday table, stepping over plates while champagne, carried between waiters, were poured directly into mouths, like parishioners taking communion. It was not a typical Friday night, but we were all having fun celebrating my bro. So, chemically speaking, cocaine and alcohol were the first ingredients in my blood. As midnight approached, I was handed by a banker what I was told was MDMA, brought from San Francisco. I had taken Molly twice, once at a wedding in Prague, and before that, at a club in Aruba. Both times, I had good experiences. I didn't particularly want to roll that night in Cabo, being late and tired from flying out of DC at the crack of dawn, having just gotten back from Colombia days before, so I nearly said, no thanks. But your brother only turns half a century once, and I didn't overthink it. I split the cap in half with my fingers, swallowed what I figured was a light dose, and kept on with the party. Biggest mistake of my life, across all of the years. The one that changed everything. When added to the cocaine, MDMA instantly had a negative effect. In previous rolls, I hadn't mixed it. This time, I felt an overwhelming anxiety. An hour into that state, I had to leave the after-party. I was consumed by unease, and I was unable to talk. When I got back to my room at Esperanza, I couldn't sleep. It was no surprise since cocaine belabors the process of settling down, so I lay awake, passing out after sunrise. When I awoke that afternoon, the angst hadn't abated. I stayed in my room, skipping day 2 of the birthday bash, waiting for this to pass. I'd never had a mood disorder or taken a psych med, so long-lasting unease was entirely new. Day 3 came and went, with me cooped up, my phone filled with messages as I skipped the close of the 72-hour celebration. And that's when the real problem started. On the 3rd night when I tried to sleep, no sleep came. None. On day 4, January 16th, I flew to Mexico City for routine work meetings and events. The same pattern continued that night, and the one after. No sleep. By the end of the 6 sleepless nights, having barely scraped through what would have been otherwise been stress-free obligations in CDMX, I flew home to DC, assuming all would return to normal in my bed, but nothing changed back home. A 7th sleepless night became an 8th with an hour or 2 of broken rest, constantly springing wide awake with churning anxiety. It was as if my brain had gotten stuck in fight or flight mode, and there was no off switch. In my prior life, a restless night, say from a red-eye flight before a big speech or a tough board meeting, would lead to sheer exhaustion the following evening, crashing hard from the lack of rest. But the catch-up sleep never came with this bizarre MDMA insomnia. I didn't get sleepy, no matter how many nights passed. After 2 weeks, I knew in my gut that something big was up. After seeing my family doctor, I was referred to a psychiatrist for the first time, who began to treat me with introductory sleeping pills, starting with trazodone. These didn't put a dent in the insomnia, and I was rotated to stronger categories of prescription. This process repeated for the next month, as I worked with a growing roster of psychiatrists and sleep neurologists, who wrote scripts for sequentially more heavily controlled meds. These trials included every sedative under the sun. I won't relist them. Suffice to say, I left no stone unturned. Just the categories of sleep-inducing RXs that I cycled through, searching with doctors for ones that worked, which included orexin inhibitors, adrenergic receptor agonists, benzos, Z-drugs, beta blockers, tricyclics, tetracyclics, melatonin modulators, anti-epileptics, anticonvulsants, antipsychotics, and, eventually, full-on anesthetics, a la a Michael Jackson. I had every blood work panel done, a sleep study where I was able to sleep for 50 minutes across the night, an MRI, EEG, I hired a CBTI coach, etc. Nothing helped or provided doctors any insight into what happened in my brain. By the 3-month mark, I had trialed over 40 prescriptions. Here, let me explain how so-called psych drugs work. When prescribed quote-unquote on-label for mood disorders like depression, anxiety, and bipolar, these drugs take weeks, if not months, to take effect. But when prescribed quote-unquote off-label for the sole purpose of promoting sleep, these same drugs either work or don't on the first night, providing diminishing returns as the tolerance builds. That's how I, under doctor supervision of course, was able to test every hypnotic RX in existence in over 90 days, searching for an elusive solution. The newest quote-unquote designer meds, like the Doras, had to be specifically ordered by the pharmacy. As weeks passed, I became so desperate for sleep that I shelled out over $1,000 for something called Quviviq, which had helped Matthew Perry. I didn't even know if it was going to work, and it didn't. Against these sleepless nights, I tried to wear myself down, spending every day in the gym and running miles outside. My goal became to tire myself to sleep. I was like a warrior fighting this battle, and inadvertently got into the best shape of my life. People's passing compliments couldn't imagine the dark source of my transformation. Still, nothing changed at night. Piece by piece, I removed as many stressors as possible, hoping that putting one on the back burner might help. So, fighting a tug of war with my heart that exhaustion eventually won, I pushed all intensity and passion for my personal life into the background, in a way that's haunted me since. At work, I'd been doing what I could to keep on top of running a company, masking my increasingly drained appearance and depleted mental state. Very reminiscent of Edward Norton's workplace struggle with insomnia in Fight Club. Anyone who saw me in those days will know that the giveaway of this scene being fiction is Norton's eyes aren't nearly sunken enough, as mine had become. On days when I couldn't function, I couched my absence as migraines among colleagues and friends. Too embarrassed to say I wasn't sleeping, something that comes naturally to everyone, as it did for me for 42 years prior. On top of this, I was ashamed by the source, a frivolous party drug, an admission I couldn't broadcast beyond doctors. So, I gutted it out in silence. Eventually, the mental and physical toll became unsustainable, and I had to start an indefinite leave of absence from the job that I loved. I cut out all travel and commitments, canceling trips, reassigning roles, and appointing surrogates. Still, nothing I did to streamline my life changed to sleeplessness. I never yawned, and I never got tired. All I could ever manage was an hour or two of medicated sleep, holding out hope with each passing week that a new drug cocktail might finally bring restorative rest. Across 3 months, I'd invested tens of thousands of dollars, seeing all experts in a 4-hour radius of DC, most of whom don't take insurance. Yet, I was no closer to a solution, let alone a basic understanding of what, medically, I was facing. I went to hospital ERs begging to be put into a coma for just one night of rest, as Jordan Peterson, who I'd met once, had done for 8 days in Russia. But not being suicidal, despite insomnia as its biggest risk factor, I could never get past triage. I reduced my daily routine to the calmest activities, a sushi diet, textbook sleep hygiene, and no matter what I did to Lululemonify my life, I couldn't sleep. It was a hell you can't imagine. Without relief, not even for one night. By mid-April, month 4, encouraged by my doctors and the few people I'd let into my struggle, I took the next step. I checked myself into the first of a series of private hospital residencies to treat this mysterious condition with 24-hour care. Across the past 2 decades, I might have taken 4 sick days. So, flying to a clinic, let alone leaving work for weeks, was out of character, to say the least. In late April and early May, I traveled to Texas, going inpatient at one of the top health facilities in the country. It's the kind of private hospital oasis, set among manicured gardens and quiet walking paths, that takes away your phone on arrival, so that nothing can distract you getting well. While there, I was placed on a different kind of med, an SSRI, with no apparent relation to sleep. It was prescribed to treat the increasing anxiety surrounding me as I shut my life down. Lexapro, a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, affects 5-HT, the same neurotransmitter as MDMA. Miraculously and unexpectedly for doctors, Lexapro put me to sleep. For 2 weeks, my life went back to normal. I flew home filled with gratitude, energized to restart where I'd left off with more passion than ever. I jumped into work and rebuilt the personal connections I'd so missed. After what I'd been through, life had handed back in a way that's impossible to describe, unless you lose yours for a while. I was beaming. No one second-guessed the positive results. After all, Lexapro targets the same protein as MDMA, serotonin, a signal fire as to what had gone wrong back in January. I felt like I had beaten the scariest thing I had ever faced, and for 2 weeks, Lexapro was my lifeline. But in a cruel twist of fate, so hard to look back on now, as I adjusted to the SSRI, insomnia came back. I stuck with the trial for 7 weeks in the hopes that it would pass, but my sleeplessness only got worse than ever. I switched to other serotonin modulators like Trintellix, but nothing put me back to sleep. The honeymoon of Lexapro became a bittersweet memory of rest that disappeared as unexpectedly as it arrived. A few weeks later in June, I finally saw the chief sleep neurologist at Johns Hopkins Medicine, Dr. Early, who I'd been trying to get in with for months, but he's booked a year in advance as the national authority on sleep science and the brain. A family friend on the Hopkins board helped me get up on the list. On hearing my story after examining my chart and consulting with his colleague at Hopkins, neurologist George Rickart, a leading researcher on amphetamine and MDMA neurotoxicity since the 90s, Dr. Early told me what I'd taken in Mexico caused a, as he phrased, 1 in a million reaction in my brain. When combined with the volatile punch of dopamine from cocaine, MDMA created a serotonin syndrome that fried my 5-HT system through toxicity. Serotonin controls sleep in a way that requires a delicate balance. This is why a few days of insomnia after Molly is typical, just not permanent. For most people, downregulated receptors restore, but in rare cases, irreversible neurosis can occur. Dr. Early told me I wasn't the first he'd seen, and referred to literature about a range of pathologies from even one time of MDMA use. With candor I appreciated, Dr. Early couldn't say if my brain would ever recover, why Lexapro worked and then stopped, or if anything would let me sleep again. Seeing the exhaustion in my eyes, he agreed to treat me on an experimental basis and ordered a week-long sleep study for more data. Becoming the test patient to one of America's most seasoned neurologists was both affirming, given the extremes I'd been through, and terrifying for what it signaled about the road ahead. June gave way to July, and the 6-month anniversary of my insomnia was fast approaching. As this dreary milestone neared, I became isolated, and I was losing hope. I hadn't been to work in months. I had retreated from my inner circle, and I lost precious parts of my life that meant the world to me. More than $200,000 had been spent going to the country's top clinics, ending up at the Retreat, a full-service facility near Baltimore that runs $50,000 every 20 days and takes zero insurance. I'd lost even more in unrealized projects and ideas, but no price mattered. Investing whatever it took to get better, knowing not just sleep, but increasingly everything was now on the line. Still, after seeking the best of the best, no one could stop the insomnia. No one could tell me how long hell would last, or if I would ever leave hell. Doctors had also run out of medications to try, the last being the anesthetic Xyrem, aka GHB, the infamous date rape drug from Diddy's parties, a Schedule I narcotic prescribed by Dr. Early as an extreme measure. The most controlled substance in America. Only one central pharmacy is authorized to dispense it. Xyrem was taking forever to get approved. Required passing through complex safety hoops, and it cost $25,000 per month. Receiving it was a month away with no indication it would work where others failed. Sleep deprivation is a form of torture, considered among the worst. Losing a single hour of rest makes Division I athletes miss twice as many shots the next day. The most sublime music ever written, Bach's Goldberg Variations, was commissioned to treat Mad King Ludwig's insomnia when sleeplessness drove him crazy. We've all experienced at some point the relentless feeling after one sleepless night from a red-eye. In just 3 days, sleep deprivation breaks prisoners of war into giving up classified secrets. So, by the time my insomnia hit the 6-month mark in July, the once unfathomable thought of cutting my life short slowly started to creep into my mind as a last resort for rest. Insomnia had become my deathbed. Compounding this was a chemical catch-22. It's paradoxical, but the most effective drugs doctors use for life-saving sleep come with black box warnings and fine print about triggering depression and suicide. So my hopelessness around not sleeping was being pharmacologically amped up by the meds I'd been prescribed to sleep. I was literally trapped in a damned if you do, damned if you don't loop, with no escape between crippling depression from not sleeping or the same from sleeping pills. This snowballing downward spiral is how, coming from a guy who'd, in December 2023, been the happiest in my entire life, with a thriving company I was expanding, a cherished waterfront in Canada, and on the Chesapeake I'd spent years developing into Gardens of Eden to enjoy forever, a skylit place in the city, financial freedom, beloved mentors and colleagues surrounding me, a dream job that took me everywhere on earth, and with a full heart. In short, it was all I ever wanted, and more. By the time July 2024 rolled around, the person I'd become wasn't recognizable as me. It was 2 lives. Because I couldn't sleep, I couldn't think, engage, or feel pleasure. I was a walking zombie who hadn't rested since January. It was worse than anything I could have ever imagined would happen to anyone I knew. Least of all, me. So for an eternal optimist who never felt down for any stretch, much less considered the idea of ending it all in my wildest nightmares, even as something I would understand in others' suffering, never able to grasp what could bring someone to that state, by July, suicidal ideation had become my everyday battle. It's sometimes said that self-harm is selfish. I thought that way too, but through the unending attrition, What came to feel selfish was continuing to drag the world down with me. A clean break would free us all. Let me be clear on something. Weakness played no part in what follows. Those who have known me, I'm virtually unbreakable. No one builds the life I did without limitless resolve, nor could they endure the parts of this story still to come without iron will. But the laws of nature are fact. No man, no matter how resilient or brave, can fight biology forever and win. Sleep exists for a reason. We cannot be without it. There is no alternative. After spending the sleepless night of July 4th watching fireworks on the Baltimore skyline from my room at the retreat, remembering my old life watching fireworks the year before on the Treadavon River among friends, now a distant memory from a past life when all was well, 2 mornings later, I gave up my last ounce of hope in ever getting better. Hope was replaced by the sinking feeling of a kamikaze pilot called for a one-way mission, summoned to his final test of courage. The universe had left one way to end the endlessness and get the rest I desperately sought for so long. Fighting back tears, I scribbled a short goodbye note, remembered a final time the people and life I'd been so in love with before this all started. I also cursed God for cursing me, and I hung myself. I've always flown under the radar, never seeking attention, so doing the unthinkable wasn't a masked plea, as it can be for those who choose pills or cuts and rarely succeed by design. This wasn't me for a minute. I'd already tried every path for help. I'm a quick study, and my method instead represented a decision. I made a strong noose and secured it at such a height that nothing could allow me to turn back once the process began, knowing there would be excruciating pain before finally blacking out. I told myself it couldn't feel worse than what I'd already endured. So, I bit my lip, prepared for that moment, and for the eternal unknown to follow. Against every probable outcome, I partially failed, or partially succeeded, depending on the measuring stick. You could call it my first piece of good luck in 6 months, coming at a crucial time. On the other hand, what I did forever changed the life that I had and wanted. It changed the people around me, and it changed all that followed. I'm here, but not in a way that feels like me, no matter how far I search for a cure this time. This story has a morose second act. Since the original intent was to share an advisory, not explore psychological torture, I hadn't planned to delve into the next chapter of my saga since July, but because it's all the ripple effect from January, and although it includes shameful details, I'm writing this map of uncharted territory for those who get blown off course. So, here's the rest of my tale. At the end of my 3rd week in the retreat outside of Baltimore, in early July, with the best doctors in the world no closer to helping me than any had been at the start of my journey 6 months before, I gave up. Despite sharing with my doctors a growing belief that the end was drawing near, and petrified family members calling to warn of the despair in my voice and feared what was coming, naively, nurses had loaned me a 14-foot charger cable. Outside in some woods nearby, out of view, I fastened the cable to a sturdy branch on an overturned log above a stream, and doubled it twice around my neck. I've always been drawn to water, so above a trickling creek was the only spot on campus I could live with, so to speak, to say goodbye. I rolled my body off the edge, the noose caught, cinched tight, and I passed out. Some time later, no one knows how long, one of the cords snapped, then the other, and I fell. 2 bursts of orange flooded my head in flashes of the most intense pain I've ever known as consciousness returned. My eyes popped open and I jolted back to life, like a scene from a movie. But the right side of my body was numb. I had twitching fingers, double vision, pulsating pupils, uncontrollable shivering, and other weird thermodynamic effects from starving my brain of oxygen long enough to shut it down. This was all later diagnosed as an anoxic brain injury to my left hemisphere. When alert enough to rise, I stumbled back to the retreat and I turned myself in. I was escorted to the emergency room in delirium, coping with the effects of the brain injury I just suffered, compounded by the insomnia that broke me down in the first place. Nothing, not even hanging, would let me escape. I was trapped in an episode of Black Mirror or the Twilight Zone, whatever. Then, in a twist of dark humor from the universe that even made Dr. Early laugh when he heard, I became sleepy in the ER for the first time in 6 months. Somehow restarting my brain brought intense fatigue, which none of 40-plus medications could ever do. So I dozed in and out of consciousness for 3 days as MRIs, echocardiograms, and other tests were done to look for necrosis or heart attack. Despite my self-induced asphyxiation, I was being kept on the hospital's stroke unit, rather than its protected psych floor. My well-groomed appearance and polished manner may have deceived doctors into not seeing the risk, ignoring what had just brought me in. That's how, shortly before I was scheduled to be transferred to a trauma unit on the afternoon of July 9th, still in anoxic delirium, I darted from the sitter watching me, when distracted, to the 6th floor exit down the hall. Without pause, I dove headfirst down the stairwell center, figuring a 6-story drop would end the suffering once and for all. But the sitter chased as I went over the ledge, catching my foot for a split second, long enough before my sock slipped through their hands, and I flipped as I free fell down the stairwell center. In mid-air somersaults, I bounced off a railing, zigzagging my trajectory to land headfirst 3 floors down, instead of free-falling 6 stories. Cries above sounded the alarm as doctors from every floor rushed to the stairwell, peering down in disbelief through my motionless, glazed eyes. Against all odds, the Red Sea parted. I had a pulse, still. Somehow going 3 floors didn't kill me, as it did fellow musical soul Liam Payne recently, but when the back of my head hit the concrete, it deviated my eyes in a way that makes 3D vision hard, called strabismus, and it gave me acquired aphantasia, which means losing your mind's eye. When I close my eyes now, I'm blind. Every image from my life was erased on impact, so I can't picture what anyone looks like. I can't envision the future. I can't lock onto my eyes in the mirror. I can't read without saying words in my head. I can't navigate without GPS. And a myriad of ways that shutting off your imagination reshapes you. I was told I'm a visual person my whole life, so losing this feels like losing me. In more dark humor from fate, acquired aphantasia, like MDMA insomnia, is exceedingly rare because rear occipital brain damage happens less frequently than to frontal lobes like head-on car crashes. So, I'm navigating this new condition again, in the dark, flying blind. After my fall, the scent of liability attracted hospital liars like sharks to blood, who threw the book at me to cover up errors. I was strapped to a gurney, sent to a ward, and locked away for 40 days. Much of that time is one-on-one, which is like solitary confinement, but with someone standing at arm's length, 24/7, even in the shower, even in bed. Still in a trance from my head colliding with cement, I thought about Noah and the flood, and Moses in the desert. I began to talk to my shadow, this alter ego beside me, like the voice in the burning bush on the mountain. Her name was Sam. When I was strong enough to walk, I walked in circles, endlessly through that wilderness, a stranger in a strange land. Sam's voice beside me brought periodic news of the outside, beyond the walls. My world, inside and out, had become magical realism. 100 years of solitude. Fiction morphed into fact in this labyrinth. My sleepless life was the requiem for a dream. Given my apparent penchant for transforming supposedly secure campuses into death traps, ward leadership was terrified of a lawsuit, so that meant all eyes on me, day and night, a never-ending watch. My world was paper scrubs, paper spoons, rubber mattress, plastic pillow, no sheets, metal toilet, no lid, Stockholm shower, no curtain. Strip searches at sunup and strip searches at sundown, the pattern repeated. Day After day, I'd become their Al Capone, their Hannibal Lecter, without the Goldberg variations as company, the Kurt Cobain of insomnia. But their overzealous posturing didn't matter. The moment to save me came before I arrived. I did my time, and 6 weeks later, I was released in mid-August. Since then, I've survived by planting and cutting trees and long adventures with my dog, trying to keep at bay depression's downward pull of gravity with a force I never knew existed. It's like I'm wearing lead shoes. Worn out by a year without rest, now navigating the deficits of a new brain trauma, I keep thinking back to my life before this all started, and the dreams I had to leave behind along the way. I can't understand why any of it happened, and I still can't sleep much. Most recently, I've spent September, October, and November fighting poison with poison by doing every last-ditch brain reset known to man, including 6 weeks of TMS, 5 weeks of ketamine, 4 SGB neck injections used by the military, and soon, tri-weekly ECT under general anesthesia. All that's missing for Christmas are 2 turtle doves and a partridge in a pear tree. But no brain reset touches me. My mind's blank. My heart lights out. There are no more stars in the sky. When you add it up, what I've lived since January is so unbelievable, it couldn't be fiction. Only fact. And now the sleepless nights that started it are the prelude to an even stranger chapter I'm still awakening in. No pun intended. I've never been a fan of melodrama, but I can't help feeling like I missed life's chance, derailing onto the wrong track one night out. My train now headed in another direction. After being the conductor my whole life, I've become its passenger, seeing where each day goes. I don't know where this new ride leads. I can still write, but I lost the ability to be succinct, as I have to say words in my head. It's all sea change. The harder they come, the harder they fall. The happy-go-lucky me of December 2023 has become a distant character in a film that I miss. Every moment radiates from the past. Through the fog of time between then and now, it's a miracle and a curse that I made it. January 12th will permanently mark, in some way, the last day of my life. My night of party drugs may rank amongst the most life-changing neurotoxic stories of all time. I'm the exception, not the rule. But I'm not the only one. The world is full of terrified people with lasting insomnia from Molly. Most get shot down by the mob who doubt a drug they love could do so much damage. You can't understand it until it happens to you. I've since discovered so many lives broken by this chemical's dark side. If you look up case reports, you'll find permanent anxiety disorders and intractable psychosis brought on by even one-time MDMA use in otherwise healthy people, as I was. If you search blogs for long-term come down, or LTC, there are troves of devastating accounts of roles, creating neurosis lasting months, years, and forever. People from around the world have contacted me to share heart-wrenching life turns. My case is exceptional, like Dr. Early said, 1 in a million. But if I had any idea I was playing the lottery, even at 1 in a billion odds, even in a trillion, I would have never taken the cap handed to me. I loved life too much to risk it. What hit my brain eventually took away the best parts of me. I can't make sense of it, nor will I ever. I'll also always wonder what good was waiting just around the corner, if I'd only taken the other turn that night. It's too much to think about. I don't understand fate, but I didn't deserve this. No one does. On December 15th, 2024, with my brain unchanged from the state it was left in by my fall 6 months before, with my mind's eye gone, and my world blurry from deviated eyes and a broken mind and heart, with each passing increasingly dragged down by the weight of the January 12th anniversary fast approaching, that would mark the start of a second year, and the rest of my life in hell. Remembering the health and happiness I still had the year before, a relentless sorrow kept pulling me down, like Sebastian's gray horse, sinking into the swamp of sadness in the never-ending story. Eventually, all of me disappeared into the quicksand. I played what I thought would be my last notes at the piano. I walked out of the house and sat on a fallen tree in the adjacent woods, trying to accept what was to come. I begged whatever power had cursed me to let the ones I was leaving behind find peace again someday. Then I swallowed 4 grams of amitriptyline, 2 times the fatal dose, and washed it down with wine. Either miraculously or like a demonic possession, before blacking out, I unconsciously stumbled home through the forest, completely blind from the chemicals, lunging into trees and walls I couldn't see and walking into windows. I ended up curled in a ball on a bathroom floor, which is where I was found and intubated, pumped full of bicarbonate and charcoal to try to save my blood and heart as I slipped into a coma. 3 days later, I awoke in the ICU with a giant tube down my throat. I spent Christmas in that hospital and eventually managed to make it through the first anniversary of the night that launched this story. But it hasn't gotten any easier, only harder, because the consciousness that returned since my OD is only partial. My mind is slower, my vision's blurrier, and my heart is more gone. If there is a lesson in my tale, it's that when you think it can't get worse, it can, because it happened 3 times. There is no end to my never-ending story, only ongoing despair. I was once a well-tuned car, cared for, maintained, navigating the twists and turns of life's roads. Today I'm a head-on car crash passed by others on the highway, pinned, paralyzed, trapped in wreckage that I can't escape, despite all I've done to try to. If there is an out other than what my burnout heart tells me is the only way, I can't see it. I can't see anything. It's all black in here, clutching the wheel of an engine that hasn't worked in 13 months, hoping against hope that if I keep pressing the pedal, someday the motor will catch, and my life could turn back on.